Hi everybody, it's Mrs. Casil. So I just wanted to give you a brief overview of this assignment because it's formatted a little differently and uses some language we haven't used before. So if we were doing this in class, we would have walked through this together and we'd be discussing this together. So this assignment asks you to explore how an app might be designed for a specific purpose and thinking through the general structure that would be required. So in this case, we're thinking about an app, right? It's something for your smartphone, which is a computer, by the way, that resides in your pocket and gets lint in the speakers and stuff like that. So you're going to make some decisions, and there's two parts to this. So the first part is this Ring Silencer app. So here's the problem. This app solves the problem of the user's phone ringing in class. It figures out when the phone is at school and it turns off the ringer. Turns the ringer back on when the user leaves school. So that's the general situation. So there's a couple things for you to think about first, which is, think about what kind of inputs, outputs, etc. But first, what kind of output does this app produce? What does it actually do, um, as it functions and fulfills its purpose? Okay. So what does this app need to know? What's the output to the user? So think about those things that are there, right? So the next part of this asks you to think about what does this, it says here, fill out the following table with information the app needs and whether you will find the information from a phone sensor or the internet, right? You might be getting inputs from different places. Those might be inputs provided by the hardware of the phone, like a sensor, and they give you the example here. They say where you are is the phone sensor's GPS, that it will be retrieving that information. But you have to decide, do you want to store that information for later? Yes or no. Sometimes it's helpful to have information stored for later. Sometimes you just want your app to use that information, make a decision, and do something else and forget that. You don't need to save that data for later. So you need to decide right here for this first one. Here are the three locations of these three schools. I'm sorry, I scrolled too quickly. Where will your app find this information? And then does your app need to save and store this information for later? So think about that. If you wanted to make this app for use for Northurston High School, what would you choose to do? All right. Earlier, actually, I think it's the algorithms lessons from yesterday, asks you to think about different types of processing. So are you sorting through information? Are you matching? Or are you counting? What type of processing are you doing to solve this problem? And then explain how will that help you get your output? Okay? How will that help you get your output? So down here it says try. Use the method you created above to process the information. This is almost like a think aloud is basically what's here, right? If you somehow have the capacity to program an app that does this, you go for it and you show me. But really this is use your imagination, use your thinking brain here. So you've set up a method. You've said what data you're going to just acquire from a sensor, if you're going to save or store this additional data. You've decided how you're going to process through that information and how that's going to help you get your answer of do you turn your ringer off or not. So think it aloud, talk through it, sort of go, wait, if I am at school and what happens in this app? And the final output is another piece here to consider. What's the final output that should happen at the end? So the last part, it says this app turns off the ringer even when the user is not in class. An advanced version would be only turn off the ringer at school when the user is quiet and not moving. Ooh, cool. If the user is moving around and making a lot of noise, it would assume that it is not class time and keep the ringer on. So how would you change your app to solve this new problem? Where would you find the new information that is needed? Okay, so those are the basic things. So, I'm just looking at like my notes for this are on my phone, speaking of apps, right? So, that's sort of my general suggestions, sort of talking through what are you being asked to do right here. I feel like the only confusing part here is where they say try it. I read that and I go, wait, what am I supposed to program this? Nope, you're really thinking through it out loud. Think about it like pseudocode. You're describing the steps in order. Do you get from where you started with the process you chose, counting, matching, or sorting? And do you get to the output of turn your ringer off or turn it back on? Okay, second challenge, the movie recommendation challenge. So this one has a little bit more information that's involved. So here they ask you, this app addresses the problem of not knowing what movies to watch. So look through the information available to you and decide what will help you choose a movie for the user. This is such they I love that they have like movie theater tickets here, but let's face it, in this era of COVID-19, social distancing, or also just all of our streaming services, this is a real phenomenon, right? You sit down and you're like, okay, I want to watch something. I've got 45 minutes. Netflix, Hulu, Amazon, YouTube, Disney Plus. What am I going to watch when there's so many choices? So I personally would love to have an app that would do this for me. So what type of output should the app produce? What's the final output? If I'm the user and I want to use this app, what do I get at the end of using it that solves this problem of not knowing what movie to watch? So, like the um, ringer problem, fill out the following table with information that the app needs and whether you will find it from the phone sensor, the internet, or some sort of user input. Decide whether you will store that information for later or not. So they give you an example. They've got movie reviews. So pulling movie reviews from the internet, this app is saying, yep, I should pull that information. I should do it myself and I should store it for later. So what about the user favorite movies? Where's the app going to get that information and should you store it or not? Some information like the user's favorite books. And then movie showings, because remember, this particular example is imagining you're going to the movie theater. So here's some imaginary movie theaters. Here's what movies are showing there. So where do you get that information and do you store it or not? And then also right here, they've got a map icon. So here's the location. How is this relevant to the choice? Okay. All right, choose what kind of processing you will use, sorting, matching, or counting. If you're not sure which one, go back and watch the algorithm video. Explain how the processing method you choose will help you get the output you have defined. Again, it says try, use the method. So uh, basically, like for this one that's a little more elaborate, I think you should make up some information here. You should pretend like, okay, so what are my favorite movies? What are the things? If you think through the steps in order of what you've said, store, look this up on the internet, ask the user to input this information, do you get the output of you should watch Howl's Moving Castle tonight? So try it out, and then what is the final output that you receive? Basically, you should double check that answer technically, I suppose, should be the same, except that up here it says what type of output. So that's an important distinction there. I didn't think through that before reading it aloud with you. This is the joy of doing this remote instruction. I'm learning as much as you guys are. So those are my hints for sort of helping you work through this assignment. A reminder, this is a collaborative class. We would have talked through this or worked through this in teams in class. So if you know somebody else in class and you want to reach out to them and ask a question, please do. And then also feel free to, reach out to me and ask me a question. So, which is awesome. So yeah, that's it. All right. Good luck, everybody. Keep learning.